Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Green Day, Father of All. This is a follow-up to 2016's Revolution Radio, a project that I felt like put Green Day back on course after the kind of disastrous trilogy that they dropped back in 2012. I should say that I'm a pretty massive fan of these guys. They're one of my favorite groups ever, one of the groups that was responsible for me even really getting into music to the extent that I am today. And after the trilogy, which I thought was kind of a mess, like I said before, I know a lot of other fans felt like it was a bit of a mess. Revolution Radio was just a really solid project overall. Not one of the band's best overall or anything, but it had some quality songwriting on it. There were some great tracks that popped up on that thing, and it just showcased that the band could make a good album even after the trilogy and all of that album's faults. So I was excited coming off of Revolution Radio to see what the band was going to do next. However, when singles from this new album here started dropping back last year, my excitement for this album slowly began to dwindle with each single, as I didn't like any of the singles from this thing really at all. And now that I've heard this record here in full, I just am kind of confused as to what exactly happened here with Father of All, because this is not a good Green Day record overall. It's not even just a good album overall, period. It's probably my least favorite record from these guys to date. And coming off of their last release, I don't really know how they ended up here with this new product. Here on this album, Green Day seem to be going for a very straightforward approach to the music. Every track on this thing is really short, really to the point. The album as a whole is also really short. It's only a little over 25 minutes in length. It is the shortest Green Day album to date. And none of these things are inherently bad. I think especially for this kind of music, pop punk, you could do a really short album with very short songs and have it work if you have really catchy hooks, if you have a lot of energy, if you have well-written lyrics and stuff like that. But unfortunately, none of that is the case here for Father of All. It just feels like everything on this record is just incredibly forgettable to the greatest degree possible. This is one of those records where I listen to it and the music is just in one ear, out the other. On every song on this record, the instrumentals are just incredibly bland. There's not a single memorable riff on this thing, or solo, or bass part, drum work. Nothing about it really stands out all that much. Again, it's just in one ear, out the other. It's just as basic as it could be, to the point where it's just uninteresting overall. And again, really simple, straightforward music like this could work if the energy was there, and the lyrics were there, and the hooks were there, but that's not the case here on this project, as I'll touch upon a bit later on. Everything on this record just feels way too basic for its own good, and it feels like all these tracks are kind of like really simple versions of what could be, stretched out to be maybe interesting songs if they had just a bit more going on in them. On none of these tracks, the group really tries to pull any kind of, interesting influences onto these songs, or on none of these songs the group decides to try anything super interesting, or new, or experimental, or anything quite like that. It's all just really straightforward to the point of being boring. The vocals on this project aren't particularly interesting either. I don't think any of the hooks on this project are particularly catchy, and the kind of echoey effect that's put over Billy's voice on most of this project also just sounds kind of odd, especially when you put it together with the very rough-sounding instrumentals here on this thing, which wouldn't be a bad thing, especially on a pop-punk release, but given the kind of odd vocal sound and mixing on this project, it just feels really weird and oddly put together. This project is also just not energetic enough to really pull off this really simple, straightforward approach to songwriting, as I've said multiple times at this point. Sure, there are some tracks on this thing that try to be energetic, like the title track or Fire Ready Aim, for example, but between the mixing on this thing and the performances that the band gives, the energy just really isn't there. I feel like the songs should be a bit more explosive than they are, but they just end up feeling really underwhelming and tame. Really nothing about this record overall makes me feel excited, which, given what the project tries to do, I think is a pretty big shortcoming on its part. When it comes to the lyrics here on this record, they're also pretty not good overall, mostly because they're just not very interesting. A lot of the times they feel a bit all over the place. The lyrics on this thing are supposed to, I guess, capture that feeling of chaos that, of course, everyone seems to be feeling nowadays in this current world, it's a pretty understandable thing to talk about. However, the way that Green Day goes about writing here on this record, it's in a way where it just seems like they're slapping together a bunch of random ideas and just making this randomness that comes as a result of this try to reflect the chaos that's happening in the real world, which isn't really the case for the most part. Not a lot of this record, I think, really reflects anything that's actually happening in the real world to a significant extent. Everything is either too vague or too general to really get all that sucked into. Aside from this, a lot of the lyrics on this thing are just really poorly written too. Like, for example, you have the song "I Was a Teenager," which is, for one thing, a really terrible song title. The reoccurrence of the expression teenager in the song just makes my blood boil. And certain lyrics here on this track talk about just being upset with being in school, which, I mean, I can understand if maybe it's a song just trying to criticize the education system or something like that. That could make perfect sense. That's a good idea for a song right there. But that's not the case here on this track. It seems more to be this just general angst against school, like you're this upset high schooler that you gotta go to school and get up early in the morning or something like that. And just, why do the guys in Green Day care about this? Aren't they like in their 40s at this point? High school should be long behind them at this point. Heck, it's been nearly 3 years since I've been in high school, and I don't care about this stuff already at this point. Just who is this song supposed to be targeted at, really? Maybe the group is trying to reminisce about their past here on the song. Maybe that's what they were trying to go for, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel deep enough for that to be the case if that's what they're trying to go for. The group has plenty of other songs in their back catalog that do the whole reminiscing about the past thing much better than this one if this was the case. And of course, they don't feature the lyric teenager in them, which makes them significantly better. The song Junkies on a High features the fantastic lyric, "Kool-Aid's my motto, oh yeah," on it. Just, what was the band thinking when they were writing this? Again, it just feels like they were slapping together a bunch of stuff over the course of like half an hour or so for each track on this thing, and that's just what it sounds like, all things considered, when everything is said and done here on this record. Everything just feels like it was slapped together really quickly just to throw something together. The closing track on this record, Graffitia, is probably the best song on the record as a whole. Not that I like the song overall, I still think it's a pretty weak song, all things considered, but I think that the songwriting on this track is significantly better than most songs on the record, mostly because there seems to be an actual topic to this song that's actually somewhat focused on here on this thing, that being racism, things like police violence, particularly when it ties into racism. But even still, despite the fact that the group seems willing to focus in on this topic here for this track, it's nowhere near specific enough to really be all that interesting. The lyrics on this track, "Another black kid was shot in town, a man with a badge in a daytime show," is probably the most specific the group actually ends up getting here on this song, which isn't necessarily a bad starting place, but it still leaves a ton to be desired, mostly because a lot of the rest of the lyrics on this song are just super generic yet again, with the exception of these couple of lines I just read out. You probably wouldn't be able to tell what the song is actually about given a lot of the other lyrics in the song, because they're just that generic and typical. And again, the topic here isn't bad, it's just that given this topic that the group decided to pick here for this song, I can think of so many other songs out there that do this very same topic and explain it and to go into so much more detail about it and actually just sound a lot better than this track too. And it just leaves this song feeling really weak in comparison, and though it's the strongest track on this thing, like I said before, mostly because of how focused it is, at least in comparison to a lot of the other songs on this thing, it's still just an incredibly underwhelming song, all things considered. And look, overall, like I said, I'm a massive Green Day fan, though even I wouldn't necessarily say that their lyrics in the past, when they come to things like social issues and politics and things like that, they've never been the most specific and detailed out there compared to any number of other artists out there. But I think the group's biggest strength in the past has been taking real social issues or political issues or even just other day-to-day issues. It doesn't even have to be super serious or anything like that, but taking these issues nevertheless and presenting them in a way that a lot of people could relate to. I think that's always been the group's biggest strength when it comes to their lyrics. But on this record here, that just does not end up being the case because everything is just too general. Everything is just too all over the place and too random to even really focus in on. Sure, it's so general that anyone, I guess, can come in and see what's going on with the lyrics on this record, but no one is actually going to be taking away anything really all that meaningful because there's nothing to really take away from this thing. As I said before, the closing track here is the most detailed and interesting that the group gets, but even then, there's plenty of other songs out there that do the same topic a lot more justice than this track does. So overall, yeah, if it's not already apparently clear, I did not like this record at all, which pains me to say because, as I said at the start of this review, I'm a massive Green Day fan. I love these guys. I like all of their previous records with the exception of the trilogy, and even on those 3 projects, there are still tracks that I like. I'm not sure if I've said this before in the past, but I do believe that in the trilogy, if you were to condense it down to just one album consisting of the best material across those 3 albums, you would get a decent project. Not one of the band's best, but still a decent record is somewhere in those 3 albums, I feel. But with this new record here, there's not a single track on this thing that I enjoy, and there's just nothing about this record that I find to be remotely interesting. It's a project that, despite how many listens I gave this, it was always just in one ear, out the other. It left no impact on me. None of the songs stood out in any way. All the instrumentals were really bland. All the lyrics were really bland and too generic for their own good. The vocal performances on this thing were underwhelming. The energy that the group brought to this thing was lacking. It's just a boring listen from start to finish. And the fact that the group decided to put this out after the really solid comeback that was Revolution Radio, I just find to be massively disappointing overall, because I feel like Green Day is just completely underperforming here on this record on pretty much every front. I have heard some rumors that this is an album that the group decided to put out just to get out of their current label contract and things like that, and that there's some other record that's going to be coming out around the corner that the band hasn't confirmed yet or something like that. But regardless if that rumor is true or not, it doesn't change the fact that this album that we got here is really bad overall. Even if the group decided to drop the best record of their career tomorrow as the actual album that they wanted to release, it wouldn't change the fact that Father of All is just a really bad project. Which again pains me to say because I am such a massive fan of these guys, but yeah, that is just my own opinion on this project. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Again, thank you guys for watching, and stay golden.